Hi, good morning, everyone. We're told we're live, so hope this is coming through and reaching everybody well. My name is Kevin Lewis. I'll be the moderator for the panel this morning. This is the corporate innovation track, sponsored by TRUIST. We'd like to thank our sponsor for sure, and Techstars as well. We'll go around and do a brief set of introductions and then get right into the discussion. And we hope everybody joins us in the discussion in the chat bar to the side because we welcome all any and all questions. Again, my name is Kevin Lewis. I teach part-time as adjunct professor at Georgia Tech, teaching innovation. Most recently, I was with the innovation firm 352. And prior to that, I was with First Data, the payments processing company, for several years, working in and then eventually leading their innovation lab. So now I will ask Jennifer to go next, please.
Good morning, everyone. Jen Reeder. I'm the director of our global client experience at BlackRock, and I also serve on BlackRock's Atlanta Innovation Hub leadership team. Prior to joining BlackRock, I actually spent time at TRUIST, so excited to see some alums and old colleagues today, where I was the senior vice president and head of our enterprise data and analytics innovation team. I have a background in consulting and digital transformation, and also spent time at local Atlanta startup Cardlytics.
Great. Bharat.
Hey, good morning. We're glad to be here. I'm Bharat Rajaram, and I'm managing director of Aflac Global Ventures. I manage our $400 million corporate venture fund, as well as our incubation and venture labs innovation programs. Many of you know Aflac as the brand behind this loud duck that you see on TV. But we are the largest supplemental life, or at least one of the largest supplemental health and life carriers in the US, as well as in Japan. As for my role, I helped start up the venture program at Aflac about 4 years ago. And prior to that, I held other roles in strategy, operations, and corporate development at Aflac. And far back enough, I was in a startup as well as in a more traditional financial private equity and venture capital fund. Very glad to be here, and I think we have a great panel. Looking forward to sharing and exchanging some ideas and good practices. Back to you, Ken.
Fantastic. Thank you. Dave, just going in order on my screen.
Hey, everybody. This is Dave Nickens. I'm the Director of Innovation for Ferguson as part of Ferguson Ventures. You've probably not heard about Ferguson unless you're in the construction trades industry. Ferguson is the largest distributor of plumbing supplies and major distributor of HVAC equipment, fire protection systems, and waterworks, and industrial products and services in the United States. As part of Ferguson Ventures, I've been working to establish an innovation lab here in Atlanta, Georgia since early 19. Before joining Ferguson in 2016, I spent around 16 years in Silicon Valley managing and building product for Visa, Cisco, PayPal, Cisco systems, and just having a blast doing it. So glad to be here.
Awesome, Dave. Great. Mariano, certainly not least.
Good morning, everyone. Great to be here. I'm the Global Director of Digital Innovation and Research and Engineering Sci Tech Capabilities at Kimberly-Clark. I joined them last year. Prior to that, I was with NCR, Coca-Cola, Home Depot, and Bell South, and had the opportunity to work with a couple of startups here in town as well. So very glad to be here.
Great. All right. Well, let's go ahead and jump in and get going. We probably need to level set here. A couple of things. Number one, we're talking about corporate innovation programs. This is Techstars Startup Week. Maybe some interest as to how these two intersect, which is why we're here. I think there have been some great panels before us on this stage this week talking about corporate innovation and startups. I'd like to hear from each of the panelists about not only their corporate innovation efforts, that's where we'll set the stage, but then we'll move into this intersection with startups and why it's so important to engage with the startup ecosystem. For those companies headquartered here in Atlanta, with the Atlanta startup ecosystem, for those companies that are broader, maybe in other markets as well. So I'll start off with one question, and I'll ask Jennifer to go first. It's one question in 27 parts. No, I'm joking. It's actually just 3 parts. So So we talk about corporate innovation. It can mean a lot of different things to a lot of people. I know when I led the innovation lab at First Data, I was almost constantly having to explain both to, sadly enough, internal as well as external stakeholders over and over again, so they understood what it means. So I'd love to know from your perspective, what's three parts? What's the goal and mission of the corporate innovation group within BlackRock? How is it organized, and how's it measured?
That is a loaded question. Lots to unpack there. I will try and do this as briefly as possible. So at BlackRock, we actually don't have one corporate innovation team, unlike probably some of the organizations here that we'll hear from in a bit. Honestly, that's mainly just because innovation is part of our DNA, and it's one of actually our key principles at BlackRock. And I think it's also just about how we define it. So we think a little bit about innovation in terms of it's something that happens every day. So we really encourage people to come to work. And if they do even just one thing different that day, that results in a better outcome for our clients, or maybe a more efficient result for our internal teams, we think about that as innovation. That being said, we do have teams that are specifically focused on driving components of innovation. So my team, for example, is focused on innovating around the client experience. And so we do that from an outside-in lens by working actually in partnership with our clients to understand their needs and expectations for the kind of experience they expect to have with BlackRock. There's other teams that are similar at BlackRock. So for example, we have an artificial intelligence lab out in California, which was actually founded in 2018 in partnership with advisors from Stanford. And they're focused specifically on looking at new methods and tools for how the organization and enterprise as a whole can use data and analytics to help us do things a little bit differently. I think a lot of you on the line today are based in Atlanta, and you might have heard about our new innovation hub here in Atlanta, which opened last year. We moved into our permanent office space earlier this year, right before COVID hit. And we have groups there that are focused on different components of innovation. So for example, we have an HR innovation team looking at new techniques to measure the employee experience and conduct different types of HR analytics than we have in the past. So just a few different stories. Innovation is really embedded across the organization. Kevin, I think I hit on that and covered all the answers. So I'll turn it over to the next person.
Sure, that's fascinating. I'd like to come back to some of those things in a bit, because I find that really interesting and maybe a little bit unusual from a corporate innovation standpoint, which is awesome. Bharat, you mind telling us again just what the goal and mission of a corporate innovation group within Aflac, or maybe Aflac Ventures, specifically how it's organized and how it's measured?
Sure. Thanks, Kevin. So I think starting with the goals and mission, the best way to think of it is, if we step back and look at what Aflac or any big organization needs to do. How do we maintain or strengthen our core business? How do we advance our business model? And then thirdly, how do we explore new areas, or what's our next frontier? And so we play in all three of those buckets. So if you think of it, and if I had to summarize this in one word, if you think of maintain, advance, and explore, right? That would be a quick way to think of it. And what we do in each of these buckets, or each of these segments, is look for interesting opportunities that will help us maintain our dominant position in the market on our first bucket. To be able to look at what we need to do to advance our model. So if that is customer experience, whether that is distribution or newer kinds of products. And then that is the advanced bucket. And then when you look at the explore, this is really about taking the kinds of risks, or at least trying to explore some opportunities which have a different risk profile from the core business. And whether that's global expansion, looking at different markets, looking at different operating models. So those are all part of our mission and our objectives. We are organized as a separate entity within Aflac. So that gives us a little more, let's say, a little more freedom, I guess, to explore some new concepts, new ideas. But that said, we work very closely with the business units we partner with them. I think Jennifer was talking about how the innovation is built in within the individual business units at BlackRock. It's a little bit similar at Aflac too. So we are the corporate group, but every business unit has their own little innovation segment or innovation team, and we partner with those teams. We go hand in hand with them. So stepping back a bit in terms of our organization, we are a separate entity within Aflac. We have 3 operating segments within Aflac Global Ventures. We have a venture fund, which is primarily an investment fund. We are a $400 million fund investing globally in startups and opportunities that are aligned with Aflac's interests. We have an incubation segment, which is, so we really serve as the platform to incubate internal ideas, new and innovative ideas. And then the third leg or the third segment is our labs, our innovation labs. And these are projects that we undertake in partnership with the business to test some new ideas or test a new concept. Again, going back to that original construct of maintain, advance, and explore. So that's our organization. I think your last question was around measurement. And it's interesting. I'd love to hear the other panelists sort of their thoughts on measuring innovation, because that's a challenge. That is challenging in and of itself. We look at it again in a couple of buckets. So the most measurable to the or most easily measurable to the least easily measurable, I guess. So we look at activity measures, we look at financial measures, and strategic measures. So activity measures are really about how many projects you did or how many investments you made. So more easily or more visible, I guess, metrics. The financial return is the second segment, and those tend to be a little more difficult to quantify sometimes. So there's that problem, and then there's the problem of how long it takes for some of these projects to really result in benefits. So we deal with those challenges day in and day out. And the third leg is strategic benefits. So over and above these quantifiable financial numbers, did we learn anything from doing this project? And so I think of our role as playing both offense and defense. On the defense side, it's really about saying, look, what is around the corner? What is in the market? And the best way to think of it is, if you're a Blockbuster, and this is the early 2000s, are you looking at Netflix, right? Are you looking at, 2 founders in a garage trying to put something together, or are you thinking about Hollywood or some other, Videorama store down the street as your competitor? So that's on the defense side, to be able to prepare the business for upcoming threats and challenges in the marketplace. The offense strategy we've talked about at length is to really enable our business to grow and maintain its dominant position. I'll stop there. I know it's been quite a few words, but I'll stop there and see if there are any questions, Kevin, or hand it back to you.
Yeah, actually, I've got lots of questions, but that's fantastic. And one note, the Blockbuster reference, I get it fully. It might be getting a little old for the audience. I'm joking. That was a long time ago, but it was a great example. Next up, Dave, and it looks like you've got a bit of a fan club here online in the comments already. So if you could tell us about Ferguson Ventures, how the corporate innovation group is organized, what its goal and mission is, and how it's measured.
Great, no problem. So our mission is really to be the innovation launch pad for the built world. It took us a long time to put those words together, but how do we help our service, the folks who work with us, every day to find and accelerate construction, services, trades, the people who are our partners. How do we do that? How do we make an impact there? How do we help accelerate an industry it's a very old industry, for the beginning of time, construction and building things. And the construction industry doesn't like you to interject things that could slow the project down or cost more money, right? Because you always hear about cost overruns and time overruns and things, and they don't like that. So how can you be very smart, very intelligent about going about helping those folks be more productive and be more efficient, and just help them augment their daily life and their workload. The Innovation Lab is part of Ferguson Ventures group itself. We sit under our Chief Marketing Officer, and that's very intentional. There's great synergy in having the corporate innovation practice aligned with the investment side of the house, because not only do we look forward and try to see, make sure that we understand what's coming, and we write white papers and do a lot of those things and prototype, but we want to make sure that we're also looking at the investments that we're making at a deep technical level to make sure they have something. And if they're in early stages, can we then mentor them, give them a little bit more help and guidance to align them to our capabilities, what we need them to do long term. So it's a great way to organize things, and kudos to our leadership for doing so. Measurement is it's very tough, and as you guys have heard, we're still trying to figure that out. We want to investigate, we want to do those white papers, we want to build a culture of innovation for a company who started in 1953, right? We want to try to do those things, and there are a lot of innovations going on. Don't get me wrong, sustaining innovations abound in the enterprise. Do we play a little bit of a role in sustaining, a little bit of a role in disruptive? How do we quick win, quick learn? Failing is learning, and that's a sort of a new concept for construction. But you have to learn, you have to go forward. So all good pieces to how we've sort of put this big picture together in the recent years.
Very interesting, Dave. Great, thanks. And Mariano, apologies, no fan club online in the comments yet, but I'm sure as you start to tell your story, I'm sure you'll garner some. So same set of questions. Can you tell us about the goal and mission of the Corporate Innovation Group for you, how it's organized and measured?
Sure. Yeah. So just a quick snippet on who Kimberly-Clark is. So almost 150 years old, very recognizable brands like Kleenex, Kotex, Scott's Paper, Huggies diapers, and so on. So the mission of the company is, lead the world in essentials for a better life. So I'd like to think about the side of the house that I get to play in as the folks that will figure out what are the new digital essentials for the better life. So how does innovation infuse digital experiences into the life of our consumers through our powerful brands? We serve 1/4 of the population of the world in one way or another. That's the number of people who touch our products. So very similar to Jennifer, though, we don't have a central corporate innovation team as such. On the other hand, we're very intentional and don't want to have a bunch of random acts of innovation happening all over the place. So we do have some harmonization happening, and the two big blocks that I'll describe succinctly are the huge machinery that is Kimberly-Clark as a CPG company, all the people that are actually looking at the future of materials to absorbency, microfluidics, new types of fiber, and so on. And the people that are looking at life sciences in terms of how our products interact with skin, which is the largest organ in the body, and all the stuff that we could do in terms of doing good for the world through our products. So there's that side of the house, which is, how do we make diapers more absorbent and lighter? How do we do feminine pads to be, all these different attributes. So that's kind of what we do today, but better. There's also a segment of that big group that looks at the future. What is going to make Kimberly-Clark successful in the next 20, 30, 50 years? The side of the house that I get to play in is the digital innovation team. So it's a very new for Kimberly-Clark. We're not a digital company, but we're figuring out what it means to be digital for a company that has a lot of paper-based products, which is an interesting challenge. So the team, my team in particular, is organized in sort of like two groups. One is people that sit in each of our regions. So for hubs of innovation, these folks are a mix of entrepreneurs and technologists, and they connect directly with the business on one hand, and they also connect with the local and regional entrepreneurial ecosystems, accelerators, incubators, startups, and academia. And then they do the matchmaking. Once they co-create a vision and a strategy for a particular brand or sector or team, if it's internal, they look at who to partner with, how to partner with. The second side of the team is what comes next, is that once that idea, that strategy, that vision is co-created, is how do we make it into tangible realities? And so that's the team that is actually an agile products team, engineers, architects, and developers working on building MVPs, POCs, and pilots. And then we reach to the point where we've disproved or prove a hypothesis, and then we turn it over to the global engineering teams for scaling. So that's how we're organized. We work closely, again, with the business and with the global engineering teams that own the products that Kimberly-Clark is known for, to try to infuse digital firepower into the life of our consumers. And how we're measured, I really liked what Bharat said in terms of the financial, strategic, and activity metrics. So this is a very new function in the organization. So we've started with activity measures and partner ecosystem development metrics. And so the next stage is to develop sort of not the same, because the global engineering team already has very stringent metrics on how they measure all the innovation activities, the return, the sales base of innovation, net growth, and all that. We, from a digital standpoint, are not there yet, but that's the next iteration of evolution.
Wow. All right. Awesome. Thanks, Mariano. And apologies, I think I've started a fan club war online in the comments, but yes, now, Mariano, you do have a fan club. It's Friday, right? So I'll actually start a little bit in reverse and ask you, Mariano, since you just went last. You talked about a couple of different things that I found interesting that can take us off on a lot of different tangents, but I want to talk about that matchmaking process, since we're in Startup Week, that you talked about. There's a bit I've seen in some corporations where it's almost like a little bit of biz dev or corp dev, where you're going out and scanning the marketplace for startups and seeing what they're doing. So an outside in perspective. There's also some models that take an inside out perspective, meaning here are our problems and we're going to go out in the marketplace to see if they can help us solve these problems. Can you tell us a little bit about which approach, or is it a mixture of the two that Kimberly-Clark takes?
Yes, the old push and pull, right? So we do both. We do have programs that are sort of designed to capture business challenges, and we run one recently in Latin America, where we connected with business leaders in the company. We did some problem sourcing with them, captured the top 10 challenges, and we made sure that there were sponsors for those challenges, and there were not just pipe dreams or aspirations. There were real tangible business problems with gaps identified and problem statements already formulated. Capture those, and then partner with a firm that allowed us to put those out in the open, right? So we believe that no matter how many good AI or ML specialists we hire, the world knows more, right? No matter how many people we hire in the IoT sensor side, the world knows more. So right, so we're very conscious about opening up the gates. On the other hand, we're a 150-year-old company, and we have a lot of trade secrets and IP that we want to protect to continue progressing. So we took those 10 challenges, put them in the open, and we were able to capture attention from about 300 startups. From that point on, we started a curation and 5-stage process, where we actually distill that into 100 or so, and then down to 35, and down to 15, and then finally a panel judge sort of selected the top 10, and we're now pursuing active pilots with those 10 startups. And the challenges are all over the place. They are about how do we do better on in-market execution? How do we transform consumer experience for this particular brand in this particular market? How do we lean on technology for sustainability? So that's one way that we work with. It's a very programmatic way, and it's intentional. So we can measure and then kind of have the ability to execute, because sometimes when you connect with a startup, things don't go well, and there's no follow through. So the other way we work with is we're very targeted, and we build what we call an innovation brief, and it has some scouting parameters. And so we go either directly through our own networks in each of the regions, or we go through third-party companies that can help us narrow down the space of the problem. If it's too narrow, too niche, requires a lot of scientific or clinical data, for example. In that case, we go in a much more focused way and not open it up to the world. But we've done other things like hackathons and ideation campaigns where we really do both internal, as you said, and also outside in.
Wow, that sounds really, really advanced. And I guess the part that has always intrigued me is coming from 15 years in the payment space, which is super secure, super secret. We all want it to be that way. There was very little appetite to go out, to push problems out and expose, to the world, what the company's issues were and what the company was trying to solve. Sounds like Kimberly Clark has actually figured out a way to balance that risk reward.
It's a moving target, and we're learning. Each time we do this, we do it for two reasons. We do it to actually get a tangible outcome, which could be a learning or a real outcome in terms of a product or service or solution or experience. But we also, and this is kind of selfish for me, is I do it to see how much can we bend some of the rules, how much can we stretch those boundaries, how quickly can we really engage? Because sometimes we like to think we're a speedboat, but we're super tanker, right? So you test these things with each of these iterations, and then you get better and better and better at refining that.
That's really great. Dave, is there a specific way that your lab engages with startups in the construction space, or even adjacent to the construction space?
Yeah, we have several examples, and it's great that we're part of the ventures organization and lab is together to evaluate and to go after it. Recently, a few years ago, we actually partnered with a company called Rocket Space to go after several very specific ideas that our leadership team wanted to go solve, and used Rocket Space, who was the incubator for Uber and others, to look at the startup world and evaluate, I think it was over 300 companies, narrow that down to 12, 15 companies, have a pitch day, and with our leadership team, and then bring 5 or 6 in to do a proof of concept and prototype with. So that was really good, and that was almost one of the genesis of having an innovation lab as part of the ventures organization and seeing the need for that. And so we've through our investments as well, we've actually invested in a limited partnership with companies like our other venture groups like Brick and Mortar Ventures. And in a recent example, when COVID happened, we have showrooms. We have I think it's several 250 showrooms and 1,400 locations where the doors are open to customers. So in that example, we wanted to try to virtualize some of that. So customers going to walk in digitally and have the same experience, a virtual showroom or a virtual counter. I reached out to Brick and Mortar, and they reached out to the startup world to look at who's out there, who could provide us capability to virtualize and to be able to do the activities that we would be doing in person in a virtual way. And that was a very good relationship to have. We found a company that helped us get off the ground and get our virtual doors back open in 5 days. It was a really good example of how you can move fast. If you have the connections into the startup world who is more nimble, who's more willing to work with you and to get things done a little bit faster, maybe you can curtail their solution to your need. And that's very important to move fast. Whereas if you go after a bigger partner, it might not be so nimble. So that's a good example. We really want to create a feedback loop with those companies so we can help mentor them and mature them towards what we need. So I think that's a good way of sort of having that conversation, having a relationship, and then just also like FergusonVentures.com, we open the doors and say anybody who is in the construction space who understands our mission to go help the services and trades, please send us your ideas submit, and we look at that daily. We get feedback. It's very, very active. And so we're also sort of just allowing others, startups and folks who have ideas to come to us.
Great. Bharat, I might be wrong about this, but I remember being approached by somebody within Aflac Ventures a couple of years ago after another industry event where I spoke. And he actually shared with me what seemed like a very much inside-out approach that Aflac was taking. That Aflac Ventures especially was really pretty prominent in their approach to startups, and the fact that you guys identify or the way that you're organized, you understand problems that are looking to be solved within the organization, and then bring those out to the startup community. Is that a correct takeaway?
That's absolutely right, Kevin. And we do a bit of both. And actually, there's elements of what both Dave and Mariano were talking about that apply to Aflac as well. I think, firstly, the fact that we combine our lab and innovation program alongside our venture fund. That's a big asset because, the venture fund, we're out there sourcing startups. We're looking at startups all day long. And it's a natural fit into the innovation funnel or the innovation pipeline. But a more formal program under the venture labs, we've actually partnered with another leading accelerator called Plug and Play out of Silicon Valley. And what we do is very similar to some of the earlier comments. We actually go to the business units. I think Mariano was talking about this. We help define problem statements, things that business units are looking to solve today, as well as future problems, looking ahead. Potential problems that we need to address. And then we essentially scour the landscape. We're actually going through this Venture Labs program right now. And typically we start with about 5 or 6 different problem statements, and then match up companies against it. So it's a little bit of a matchmaking process. Plug and Play helps us with that. But also, there's direct outreach on our side as we've scanned these startups where, we might see a good fit. And typically what that results in is a proof of concept. And what is unique about it is we fund it. So Aflac Ventures will essentially pay for a proof of concept, for the business, on behalf of the business. We will also take on all of the administrative, legal, hassles. So, if you're a large company like ours, getting a contract done is not a matter of, it's a matter of months, right? It's not days or weeks. And then what we've done is to come up with a light process that doesn't bypass any of the checks and balances, any of the compliance requirements, but then does it with a light touch. And so we do these POCs, proof of concept programs with startups. And then any that are successful, our only ask is that the business find a way to plug it into the pipeline, right? Their innovation implementation pipeline. So we've had some good success with that. Also opens up doors to investment. And this is where, again, I cannot, emphasize the aspect of investing enough. Talk is cheap, right? Everybody talks innovation. But now when you're committing dollars behind it, you're invested in the success of that startup as an opportunity for you to grow or for them to assist you in some way in your business. And so that's the kind of commitment that we demonstrate to the startups. And then last but not least, we're always open for startups to come and reach out to us, talk to us, both within the local area, but also, more globally. So we do that all the time. But I'll pause there. Not sure if I answered all of your questions there, Kevin, but I'll pass it back to you.
You've answered them and you've spawned others. I'm watching the time because I've got a million different questions. But Jennifer, I'd like to understand BlackRock's perspective on engaging startups.
Sure. Definitely some similarities with the group here. It did kind of push and pull, but we look at startups a few different ways. What I found really interesting when I joined BlackRock a year and a half ago is really at our core, we think of ourselves as a technology company. So even though we are, the world's largest asset manager and we're managing $7 trillion in assets on behalf of our clients, that is all powered by technology. And so where we think about startups and the opportunity to really help us deliver those outcomes that we're striking to deliver for our clients, which is really what it comes back to in terms of our mission with being a fiduciary to our clients. We think about startups as playing a role to help us accelerate some of those outcomes, and especially from a technology lens. So when we think about sort of our roadmap and the things that we're trying to achieve as an organization on behalf of our clients, I think probably similar to others, we have sort of a build, buy, partner strategy. And we do have a group specific within our technology team that's looking at strategic partnerships and thinking about how startups can play a role in that ecosystem. In some cases, those are partnerships. In some cases, they're acquisitions. And actually, in other cases, it's mentorship. We want to be a part of that community, and we want to help startups to succeed. So we do play an active role with different startup mentorship programs. I'll give an example that's, I think, a little bit unique to BlackRock in terms of one engagement. So we take our social impact very seriously at BlackRock. That's a big part of our mission. And so oftentimes we're actually partnering with startups in terms of helping to align our philanthropic needs of our clients and the world more globally. So actually earlier this year, we led a $250 million Series F round for Farmers Business Network, which is an agribusiness marketplace and network focused on sustainability. So I think that is an alignment of sort of BlackRock skills and where we want to see, focus from a social impact perspective with sustainability and supporting that startup to grow and achieve their needs. But I do think as sort of the market and especially asset management as an industry evolves, we will continue to look at acquisitions that help sort of augment both our technology platform and our asset management expertise.
Gotcha. That's great. And it looks like we've lost Mariano, at least hopefully just temporarily. I'd love to go off script if we could, just for a second, because there he is. He's back, ladies and gentlemen. Because I find something really kind of interesting.
Worried, Kevin.
What's that?
He said the fan club was worried, Kevin.
They were. Mariana, please don't do that again. I don't think I can, I don't think I can survive all the arrows. As everybody here is giving great examples, and there's some wonderful similarities between the way your companies and organizations approach innovation and engagements with startups, and there's some interesting differences too. I wonder if I could ask this question. Outside of, and Brad, I think maybe you were the one, either you or Dave maybe think of this the most, outside of formal risk management from a ventures perspective, which you might not be able to do since you're closely connected there. If you think about failure, right? Startups fail, high failure rate. We know internal projects have a failure rate within corporations. Now, innovation has a failure rate within corporations. Like, you keep leveling up these probabilities or propensities for failure. I love anybody's perspective. I'll just open up the floor. How do you guys manage that from a corporate standpoint? And then the second part of that question is, does that influence how you engage startups?
I'm happy to start and kind of continue from what I just wrapped, Kevin. I'll be honest, I've only been at BlackRock a year and a half, so I have not really had the chance to witness too much of that there. But from my past experience, both, in a startup and in other roles, I'll share two things that I think either could have been failures or help sort of prevent failures from that experience. So one of the things I've observed in more of a corporate setting is actually if folks are not having a dedicated budget for innovation. And Bharat and I were actually just joking. We both are in the 2021 budgeting cycle. I think his next meeting is a big budget review. I finished my budget memo last night. And what I've seen at other large organizations is everyone has this annual budgeting process. And it's so easy for innovation to get lost if you're not having dedicated funds and a dedicated financial commitment to that. Because otherwise, honestly, you're competing with funds to run your core business, and you have to continue to grow your core business while innovating alongside that. So I've seen cases where innovation is sacrificed because that budgeting process isn't making room for innovation. And I've seen corporations also do a really good job at setting that aside to make sure it happens. So that's one. And then the second, I actually experienced when I was at a startup, and I've seen this at corporations too. When I joined Cardlytics, it had only been about 5 years, which in startup life is a lifetime. And one of the things that the executives always told our new hires is to never lose their newness, and to always ask why. And I really think that the culture at Cardlytics, it helped integrate sort of new talent with the folks that were 5 years ago sitting at the kitchen table with Scott and Lynn to keep growing and challenging what needed to happen. But I see sometimes in organizations, they suffer from the we've already tried that attitude. And so that newness and the asking why that I was privileged to experience at Cardlytics, corporations could benefit from that attitude in general.
Gotcha. Really?
Just to add to that, to what Jennifer was saying, I think one of the challenges that you see often is the culture, right? The cultural aspect of it that Jennifer was talking about. There is an aversion to failure, right? And there is an aversion to risk taking. If you're in the business and let's say you're running a $1 billion P&L or $10 billion P&L, whatever it is. Why would you chance a lot? Yeah, right? I mean, you're just going to say, okay, well, let me do some incremental tweaks and innovations, and let me just keep moving on. And failure is often seen as a bad thing. And one of the things that I would point to in the structure that we've built, is I think this is an ongoing area of work for us. It's work in progress, but convince the organization that failure is not all bad. Not all failure is bad. Let me put it that way. And if you fail quick. And that is what our whole model is designed to do, is do these POCs, do these test projects or pilot projects. If you fail, that's fine. That's okay. You learn something out of it. That's where your strategic benefit comes in. We'll chalk it up to that. Let's move on. Secondly, I think Jennifer was also talking about the funding aspect of it, to isolate that funding or to separate funding. In our structure, what we do is we fund these POCs. So these POCs are contracted by, paid for, managed by the ventures group, of course, with participation and partnership from the business. But that allows us to go to the business and say, look, if you don't have the money, don't worry about it. We've got the money. We'll back you. If you fail, don't worry about it, because this is not a project that is listed on your business objectives right there. So it's okay to fail here. It's fine. And these are structured as 10 to 12 week pilots. So it's not a big drag of anybody's time. So, and if you fail quick and you learn something from it and you move on. So that's kind of how I would summarize our stance on it.
Yeah, if I could add just a quick thing, I think the culture piece is huge, especially in companies that are over a century years old. So at the same time, innovation culture without innovation structure is probably not going to work. So you need to have the frameworks and the processes that allow you to, measure the entire process end to end, from engagement, scouting, engagement, problem definition to actually getting the results. So one of the changes that we put in place is, before you start any type of pilot work or contract with a startup, there has to be a learning plan that has been vetted by the business, so that they are okay if we, iteration 1 or 2 disprove the hypothesis that we're going after, and then we kill the thing. One of the things that happens in corporations is that these things continue to have, life after life after life, like a hacked video game, and then you never get rid of those zombie projects, right? And then so everyone gets a bad taste. The business doesn't trust in the startup doesn't want to engage anymore. So there is a process, there is a science to how you do these things, and I'm not claiming we have it all down, but I'm saying we're getting better at it because more often than not, what happens is things spike in terms of interest and engagement with the business, and then go down, and there's no follow through, there's no learning plan, there's no outcome, there's no closure. So I think that's one of the key things in failure. And the other piece is, as already been said, is how can we be more frugal and fail fast and cheap, right? Instead of sinking millions of dollars into a project and having a committee of 20 people decide on an innovation project, and I have experiences from past lives on doing that versus starting with a 25 to 50K pilot investment, very frugal, very cheap, very low fidelity, that allows you to test the hypothesis in the market. That's, I think, a huge failure point, is that we bias ourselves into believing that we have something, or we have an unmet need or a job to be done, and we haven't really gone deep enough. And if that at the root is not fixed in terms of how you look at it, then no matter how many processes you put after that, you're not gonna be successful, and it's going to be harder for you to sell failure as learning.
Ed, I could talk about this for about 3 hours. I know we don't have that much time here. Bottom line, if your leadership team hasn't set aside headcount and dollars for innovation, stop. Just don't try. I mean, that is the first and most important thing. If your corporate foundation doesn't have thought leadership as a pillar, walk away at this point. Don't waste your time, right? There's some fundamental things that you have to have in an enterprise, in executive buy-in and sponsorship, the understanding that failing is learning. We have P&Ls, we have balance our budgets and our spend and our head count and all the things. And if you're seen as a liability and not an asset, we can talk to our shareholders about it and check that box, but we don't really care what the outcomes are of that organization. You're just sort of lip service, right? Corporate innovation has to think about how to fundamentally change and create new business models and fundamentally change the way that we interact with our customers, our internal stakeholders. So if you're not doing that, take a step back, right, and reevaluate how to make that happen. I'll tell you a secret, and one of the secrets that we've learned is building a practice of service design within an innovation and ventures organization. So service design is a way to step back and to really listen to your customer and to think about it first before you go do it. I've run out. I have skunkworks projects even right now that we're working on and we're doing things. But how do you spin that back into the organization or spin it out as a startup? Do you have a plan for that? What are your outcomes you're trying to achieve, and how does that align to the overall goals of the enterprise? If you're just this isolated, thing that's doing great, future thinking, awesome things, but it doesn't tie back. It doesn't add value over the next 3 to 5 years to your corporate direction or your bottom line, or top line or bottom line, either one, then you have a problem, right? You have to reevaluate. So I think this is why a lot of innovation leaders have a lot change direction, pivot, do a lot of different things, and there's no real stability in that role and that component of the larger enterprise, is because they just lack that core foundation to think, to do, and evaluate very quickly and move, and then spin it back into the enterprise.
So, sorry, Dave, didn't mean to interrupt.
No, I'm done. I'll stop there. I have plenty more, Kevin, but
I know I could go an hour deep with each one of you, and would love to, actually. But this raised a question in my mind that actually ties into a question from the audience that came from the Dave Nickens fan club. So I'll ask you this first. So Dave, where my question comes from, a lot of the failure is learning, right? One of my favorite quotes is failure is tuition. That's great from a corporate innovation standpoint, especially when we've got set budgets and we know pilots are going to fail. Yes, startups and startup founders realize that their venture is risky. There's a question, and I don't think there's an answer to it other than it just depends. But I think we could all recognize that there's a risk of a startup, to use the colloquialism, hitching their wagon to a corporate pilot too much. Kimberly Clark, Aflac, BlackRock, Ferguson, y'all are all, major, if not the dominant players in your industries. What startup wouldn't want to work with y'all, right? And if y'all come around with a pilot, they could be all in, and that could be very, very risky. Whereas we move on to the next pilot, knowing we've got a failure rate, that failure might be catastrophic for them. So, and maybe that's just too deep to go into here, other than a lot of things that it depends. The question from the Dave Nickens fan club is, in what ways do organizations help coach or train startups on how to navigate large enterprise organizations? And that's where my time, coaching, are you guys getting in, other than the ventures arm and understanding the finances of the organization, are you guys getting in too deep? Is this pilot going to be too risky? Is this make or break for your organization? How do you guys work and coach and train startups to work with you specifically?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we're still refining how to do this in the most effective way. We make introductions. We advocate for the startup and for change. We're change agents by definition, right? And we're advocates for the startups and these new ideas in a very old industry who doesn't like change. So we'll make the introductions with our business unit leaders. We'll start proof of concepts, and you have to get the mental, you have to get the brains of the business units involved. There's so much going on, right? And why would they take their time to invest? They're running, multi-billion dollars worth of, P&L, and why would a startup matter? Well, you have to make sure that you understand their needs, and that's why you have to go around and listen. And it's one of the lost arts is listening, right? You got to go talk to your business unit leaders, find out where their problems are. And, it could be, business process or technology, right? People, whatever it is. And then make them do the matchmaking process and advocate for that startup. I'm not going to go advocate for a startup that I haven't vetted. So there's a lot of times we'll go in and, without the startup maybe even knowing what's going on, we're asking questions, we're getting down to their tech stack, and then then they pass the sniff test. Okay, thumbs up. Now we're going to make Matchmaker, and then we're going to do a proof of concept where we're doing a lot of the work in the lab, and you just have to be a stakeholder, invest a little bit of your time for status and update meetings, but ultimately the outcomes are something that's going to dramatically change the way you do things in a positive way. And if you could tie those things together, it becomes a pretty amazing thing. And then the risk there is not doing it. So how do you change the risk of, hey, you know what, if we can get ahead of this, we have competitors that are going to take advantage of it. If we don't invest in this company, who else is going to invest in? And we lost that opportunity.
Yeah, the risk of doing nothing is often greater than the risk of at least trying something. Jennifer, you were nodding your head a lot when I was asking that question. Anything you wanted to add?
I find it a really interesting question, and I think it's something, we spend a good bit of time actually mentoring startups. So separate from when we're actually making an investment or looking at a specific business partnership or an acquisition even, we have different organizations that we partner with that help us actually engage in a mentorship relationship. And I think that's just part of our, coming back to the culture discussion, we fundamentally at our core, we consider ourselves to be a technology company, not the world's largest asset manager. And because of that, we have a lot of passionate people who want to spend time helping startups be successful. And I've been fortunate enough to be part of some of those mentorship engagements. And we are talking about financials. We are reviewing elevator pitches and giving feedback and investor decks. And some of those professional relationships have ended up turning into professional ones with some of those startup founders, and perhaps down the road ultimately turn into a partnership or even an acquisition. But it starts with a mentorship lens. And that's something that I think we're really proud of to be able to participate in.
That's awesome. Is that something that you formalize, or something that's a little less formal?
There's actually a few different organizations that we partner with that run some of these mentorship programs specifically. So where we engage with them and they sort of help us from a facilitation standpoint.
Gotcha. Are you specifically talking about incubators or accelerators, or another type of?
A mix, and even just some nonprofits that actually part of their mission is to help startups be successful and get that mentorship pairing.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Broader, Mariano, anything else that you guys would add?
The only thing I would add is part of our Venture Labs program. So this year is different because of COVID. We had to do it virtual, but when we do that selection process, we actually have our business leaders come in. So day one is actually the business leaders pitching to the startups on teaching them what the problem is, what the business is. And that happens before the startups actually turn around and pitch to those same business leaders on what solutions they can provide. But beyond that, I will also tell you it's a labor of love. We spend a lot of time, working with startups, guiding them, educating them, teaching them the language. I think the lingo is really important. When you pitch to the business owners, if you can talk to them in a language they understand, that actually solves a lot of problems, makes it much easier for them to communicate. So we do a lot of that is informal. So that's the art of it, I guess. And then, of course, on the science of it, we actually get our business leaders to come in and present to the startups.
Great. Mariano?
Yeah, for our engagement programs, we do partner with these third-party companies that help us mentor the startups, and that's part of the vetting process to get from 300 to 15, right? On the other hand, having also been in startups is, as Dave said, listening, right? Understanding the problem space, the industry, the market, the technology, yes. But also understand the customer. Who is the customer? Not a company is not a customer. The customer is someone inside a company that has a job title and has a job and have limited cycles. So, I am, probably sending a message to startups here. Do as much as you can to prepare yourself, right? Don't rely on me and my cycles and my team and their cycles to be available to you to mentor you. So this also tells me when we meet with startups whether they have done that part of the job that they need to do to win customers. So I think that's an important piece that sometimes is relegated because the team is focused on getting the solution and shipping, right, and iterating. But you have to understand the customer space in that depth.
That's really great, Mariano, and a fantastic transition. Since we're coming up on time, I was just going to ask everybody to do a round robin kind of rapid fire of any last parting thoughts that you'd like to share for either startups that are engaging with corporate innovation arms or corporate innovation arms that are looking to engage with startups. Dave, you mind a quick rapid fire?
I would recommend read a book called Loon Shots by Safi. And in there, you'll learn about artists and soldiers and the difference. It's a great book, changed the way I thought about things from an innovation perspective and a startup perspective. Be tenacious, don't give up. We're all busy. Work on the foundations of what you want to go after. Know what you're about. Know where you stop and start. Know what's out of scope and in scope for your idea and in your what you want to do with your startup. That's the biggest thing. Don't be everything to everybody. That's never going to happen.
Great. And if you wouldn't mind putting the name of that book and the author in the chat, that'd be helpful, I think, for everybody. Bharat, last parting thoughts?
Yep. For the corporates out there, understand that these are startups. They're not. You're not dealing with a big vendor. You're not dealing with an IBM or an Accenture here. So understand that they are cash strapped. If you go and ask them to give you make sure that they can get through a procurement process or your compliance process, they're going to need some assistance. So be prepared before you embark on that journey.
Yes.
On the flip side, for the startups, I think Mariano talked about this. I cannot emphasize the aspect of preparing for this, right? So preparing to meet or present to a customer, potential customer, know that customer, know what they do, know what business they're in, and also know the people that you're going to be talking to. And what's really important if you're a startup and you're trying to find that anchor customer, right? To your point, I think you were making this, Kevin, earlier. Don't just go latch yourself onto a corporate and hope to ride the coattails. Find the right partner. I think that's another one that you cannot emphasize enough. If I might add, finding the right partner, the right team, and the right individual to work with in a large corporate, I think is priceless in value.
Awesome. Jennifer gave you the first word. I'll give you the last word.
I'll add one more book, The Design Sprint by Jake Knapp. There's a lot of great principles there that I see us leveraging at BlackRock, and I've seen in other organizations. And I think I learned something hearing from everyone today. So if I walk away with one thing, it's innovation can look really different and can take really different forms. So I think that should be encouraging to everyone in the audience, that even if there's not that perfect match with that first corporation, there's probably many different ways and forms to find that. So keep looking.
Well, that's fantastic. Great last word, Jennifer. And we're 2 minutes over time. I do apologize. I'd like to thank our panelists again, Jennifer, Bharat, Dave, and Mariano. I will leave you this one last thought that I thought was really interesting as I'm listening to everybody's responses. It's obvious when you think about it, but I think it is kind of interesting. Represent companies that are quite established. You talk about corporate innovation programs. I think suffice it to say, I've yet to come across an AI or NLP organization that has an innovation arm to them. But besides that, if anybody wants to reach out to our panelists on LinkedIn, and thank you everybody for joining. Have a great Friday and a great rest of your weekend.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.